With Halloween being a monster success, Carpenter wanted to go in a more supernatural direction with his next film, The Fog, in 1980. Despite a rough production that included many reshoots, the film was yet another success, securing John Carpenter's status as a master of horror. He left the horror genre briefly in 1981 to direct the sci-fi adventure film Escape from New York starring Kurt Russell, but returned to horror in 1982 to direct Russell again in The Thing, a remake of the 1951 film The Thing from Another World, produced by Howard Hawks. The budget for The Thing was $15 million, Carpenter's largest budget up to that point, and it allowed the film to feature some very groundbreaking visual effects and makeup. Unfortunately, the budget also caused the film to initially bomb in the summer of '82. Steven Spielberg's E.T. had been released 2 weeks prior, and due to its lighthearted and family-friendly take on extraterrestrial visitors, it ended up being the year's highest-grossing movie. The Thing, on the other hand, had a darker and more sinister approach to alien invasion, which didn't sit well with audiences, and it wasn't until years later that it became one of the most beloved sci-fi horror films of all time. The failure of The Thing led to Carpenter directing an adaptation of Stephen King's Christine, a film he said he only did because it was the only offer he was given at the time. In 1984, Carpenter took the job of directing Starman, starring Jeff Bridges. In an ironic twist of fate, Carpenter was chosen to direct this film in which the emotionally driven story about an alien visitor was being compared to E.T., the film that previously trampled The Thing. Critically, the film was Carpenter's most successful in years, but didn't draw huge box office numbers. In 1986, Carpenter went on to direct Big Trouble in Little China with Kurt Russell as his lead actor yet again. The action comedy was another bomb for Carpenter, making only $11 million back from its $25 million budget. Yet it went on to become another cult favorite.
1, 2, 3. We may be trapped.
By this time, John Carpenter decided he had had it with Hollywood, so he went back to his roots of low-budget horror and directed Prince of Darkness in 1987, after struggling to find some financial support. Despite being an interesting mix of religion and science, the film was yet another critical failure for Carpenter. What saved it from completely bombing was the fact that the budget was so small, but unlike his earlier low-budget horror films, this one only gained a modest profit. He then began work on the screenplay for They Live. His interest in telling an alien invasion story was sparked when he read a comic book adaptation of a short story from 1963 called 8 O'Clock in the Morning, written by science fiction writer and cartoonist Ray Nelson. The short story involved an alien invasion premise that was similar to Invasion of the Body Snatchers. With the short story floating around in his head, John Carpenter also wanted to tell a story that represented his loathing for how the 1980s was revolving around consumerism and Reagan-era politics. He would watch TV and be disgusted at how it seemed like every little thing had to be commercialized. Selling out to make a quick buck seemed to be all that was on everyone's minds. Carpenter was able to acquire the rights to the Ray Nelson story. However, due to the fact that he was writing an original screenplay based on this outside source, along with using suggestions from his cast and crew during filming, Carpenter decided to use a pseudonym for his screenwriting credit. He went under the name Frank Armitage to write the script. He chose this name as a tribute to a character name in the H.P. Lovecraft short story, The Dunwich Horror, and also used it as the name for Keith David's character in the film. For the lead role, Carpenter cast professional wrestler Rowdy Roddy Piper, whom Carpenter had met at WWF WrestleMania 3 in early 1987. Carpenter really felt Piper seemed to be a much more worldly guy than the average Hollywood actor, and that's what got him the part.
There's something about him that is unlike other Hollywood actors. He seems to have lived life.
I've been electrocuted, I've been stabbed 3 times, been in a plane crash, I don't know how many car crashes.
The lead role is never given a name in the film, but Piper's character is credited as John Nada, a tribute to the main character George Nada in the original Ray Nelson story. In the role of Nada's sidekick Frank, Carpenter specifically wrote the part for character actor Keith David, whom Carpenter had previously directed in The Thing. Carpenter was able to raise a $3 million budget for They Live, which shot for 8 weeks in the spring of 1988 in and around downtown Los Angeles.